Hey, and welcome to another edition of the Strip Pal Naked Snapshots. This time I've been rereading Miller and Sienkiewicz's Elektra Assassin, which constantly makes me amazed and gasp in awe at the power of comics. It is an unbelievable examination of what the medium and the form can do. And it was a handful of pages that I briefly tweeted about. That were the ones that got me super excited, and I really had to just do a video and talk a little bit about these pages. Because what this does is show the versatility and the range that you can really get away with in terms of art style to communicate something. And comics are all about communication, and no more so, I think, especially in superhero comics, than Elektra Assassin. This is pure communication on the page. What we get is a sequence of pages, and I'll just quickly flick through them, of this kind of training montage, almost. And we get 3 pages in this incredibly graphic way, right? We get panels that don't have borders on them. You can see they just cut straight into the white gutters. And that's on each of the sequences. We get characters that are overtly stylized. And the color of the skin of the characters, the color of the backgrounds, the color of the elements and the details, is all over-stylized, overly graphic. And what you also get is you get a set of pages that come in a handful of panels. So this page is a 10-panel page, and then we get a 5-panel page that's stacked, and then we get another 5-panel page that's stacked. And so we get a sequence of images that are cut and divided by these white lines, very specifically divided by these straight white lines that don't have any outlines on them at all. And that creates a look for this sequence of pages. And it holds this scene together in a natural way, even though the style itself is very, very unnatural. So there's a kind of balance to this in the way that the incredibly stylized graphic approach to that is held in a kind of structure by the nature of the panel grids. So this is a very structured approach to what is not a particularly structured visual. Similarly with this page, it's an incredibly stylized page that gets held into place, essentially, by these grids. And again here. And what it does is it builds up a kind of a sensation of what this sequence will feel like. And the thing that also happens with this comic, which is also very, very interesting, is the whole thing is played over with this hyper-stylized voiceover, and I'm using hyper-stylized a lot because I don't know how else to describe this, but you get a voiceover that's incredibly stylized and it runs almost constantly over the whole issue. And so by doing that, it becomes hard to know when a scene will begin and when it will end, because the voiceover itself is constant throughout the whole thing. The voiceover doesn't really adhere to scenes as in the same way that the visuals do. And so you get this kind of sequence, this 3-page sequence here, and all of a sudden, it comes this incredibly magical stop. It just, boom, stops with this page, which looks like something out of a completely separate comic, and yet is not. And you don't necessarily see it coming because of the way that the dialogue in the captions just bounds straight through from scene to scene to scene. It just carries on. And so all of a sudden, it's almost like slapping straight into a brick wall. You go from these incredibly structured pages with this hyper-stylized visual into this almost painterly kind of like oil paint look that's also now got a panel border. You can see it's almost like this kind of like dry marker panel border. And so the whole storytelling style of this shifts in one image, in one page turn, before going back to this graphic approach. And yet it never feels out of place, because the dialogue essentially functions as a driver for the narrative, which allows the visuals to do almost anything they want, because it's being held together by the glue that is the narrative captions. And so when people talk about the narrative captions of things being a cheap way or an easy way to kind of contain story, in some regards, that's very, very true. I don't think it's true in this case. In this case, what you get is a comic that is purely held together by the sensibilities of the narration captions that allows Sienkiewicz to do this incredible stuff, page after page after page. And it's really worth understanding how, over the course of a single comic, there is about 4 or 5 different art styles in this book. I mean, this is, again, something almost entirely different than what we see before. And yet the whole thing wraps together because one layer between the text and the visuals, so the textual layer, functions in the same way throughout the whole comic. Now, there's a lot to discuss here, way more than I've got time for in this snapshot, in the way that, for example, the stylistic approach of the narrative captions is also reminiscent of the stylistic approach of some of the visuals. But for now, just consider that idea that if one of those things, either the visual or the textual layer, is holding together some kind of glue to the whole story, it allows the other layer to do these kind of crazy, wild, over-the-top things, page after page after page. It also gets your mind racing about all the possibilities that comics allow in this form. But again, I think this is something we'll touch upon in a future episode at some point when the world settles down in some capacity. But for now, dig out your copy of Elektra Assassin. If you don't have it, get it on Comixology and go and look at this unbelievable approach to mainstream storytelling in comic books. Thanks for watching.